Next, I would like to introduce our third speaker, which is Dr. Colin Watson. Dr. Colin Watson is the Deputy Director of Assessment, Research and Development in the Standard and Testing Agency. This is the part of the Department for Education in the United Kingdom, responsible for developing and delivering the national curriculum tests in England. Dr. Colin has worked on national tests for over 20 years, including more recently work on support work on global standards. And prior to this was a secondary school mathematics teacher. Dr. Colin is leaving the Standards and Testing Agency shortly and will be joining Australian Council for Educational Research of the United Kingdom as a research director from August the 1st, 2022. Dr. Watson will speak about national curriculum assessment in England. We're looking forward to your presentations, Dr. Watson.
Thank you very much. And it's, as I say, great to be here. I will share my screen and hopefully, there we go. Hopefully that is working. Well, yes, thank you for inviting me to talk today. I'm here to, as part of the Department for Education for the UK, but in the United Kingdom, education is actually devolved to the four nations. And so my responsibility is for England. I'm also going to talk mostly about large-scale national assessments in primary school. Obviously, in secondary school here, we do have qualifications that are large-scale assessments, but they are managed and delivered by other organisations, not the Department for Education. And at present, we don't have any other large-scale national assessments in secondary school, though we have just, ministers have just announced that they want to introduce a sampling assessment in literacy and numeracy at the end of Key Stage 3, which is about 14-year-olds in England, but that isn't in place yet. So I'm going to start by the sort of overview of the different national assessments that take place in England. And much like Hong Kong, our assessment, our schooling system is broken into key stages. There's the early years foundation stage, which goes from age 0 to 5. Most, of course, of that is outside of school, though not the final year of it, reception, and there are some assessments that take place then. Then you have Key Stage 1, which is years 1 and 2, and there are different assessments that take place during that key stage. And then years 3 to 6 are Key Stage 2, and again, some different assessments that take place then. And I'll go into each of those assessments, their purpose, and some of the issues that there are surrounding them. So as I say, there's an assessment in reception. In fact, there are 2 different assessments in reception that have very different purposes. The first is the reception baseline assessment. So this assessment has a very particular purpose, which is to measure, or to be the starting point from which we can measure the progress of pupils throughout primary school. England has had large-scale national assessments for about 30 years, but there have been some significant changes over the last 10 years. The reception baseline assessment has been brought in only this academic year, so it is very new. Our large-scale national assessment systems are often linked to our accountability system. Accountability in primary school, schools are held to account both on the attainment of pupils, the standards they achieve by the end of primary school, but also the progress that they make with their pupils from the time they get them until the time they leave. In order to do that, obviously, you need an assessment at the start of the period for which you are measuring progress. Previously, that's been the end of Key Stage 1, but it was decided to move it to reception so that schools could be given credit for the work they're doing in those first few years in school, which are obviously really important. It's a nationally set assessment of early mathematics, language, communication, and literacy. But they are short tasks undertaken one-on-one with a teacher. The child won't necessarily know that they are doing an assessment. And it's administered in the first 6 weeks of a child starting school. But importantly here, one of the things we wanted to prevent was inappropriate labeling of children or limiting those expectations just because of their prior experience before they've started school. And so for that reason, no scores are reported to the school. Obviously, they do the assessment with the child so they can see how the child has done, but we don't provide scores back because we don't want that labeling. And we want schools to have high aspirations for all of the children. The data, therefore, is stored centrally and will be used to create that progress measure when the children reach the end of primary school. For each of these, when the slides come out, I've put a link on the bottom. So if you want to find out more information, then obviously you can go and look there. But as I say, that assessment is purely for the accountability system. So also at the end of the early years foundation stage, there is another assessment, which is called the profile. And this one is much more focused on giving parents and schools information about children, but it is very much a teacher assessment. It's holistic judgments made by teachers against the 17 early learning goals. There are no set tasks from the centre. Those early learning goals cover communication and language, personal, social, emotional development, physical development, literacy, mathematics, understanding the world, and expressive arts and design. So you can see quite a broad range of things that schools are asked to report on. It's assessed in the final term of the year in which a child reaches age 5, and it's basically really just reported to parents. So it's to give parents that information on how their child is doing once they've got to the end of that early years foundation stage. In the past, there has been moderation of those judgments, but it felt that it was creating a huge workload burden for teachers. And so that moderation was removed, but obviously it does therefore mean that it is difficult to use that data for any other purpose because of the comparability issues that there may be with it. Once children get into Key Stage 1, another relatively new assessment, it's actually been around 10 years now, but not as long as some of our other ones, is the Phonics screening check. This is an assessment that is used to determine whether pupils are able to decode using phonics to an age-appropriate standard. And so it is, again, much more focused on the school. Data is collected nationally, but it is not reported at a school level. It's only reported at a national level. Again, this was an attempt to try and lower the stakes of the assessment without producing sort of performance tables and league tables of schools and so on. So it's a nationally set assessment. Again, this is mediated by the teacher because of the age of the pupils and the nature of the task. Pupils are reading 40 words out to their teacher, 20 of them real and 20 of them pseudo words. And the teacher is determining whether or not the child was able to read the word accurately. There is an expected standard on the assessment, so children have to achieve. It's been most often 32 out of 40. And it is administered at the end of year 1. So schools do this assessment, they report the results to parents, and national and regional performance is published, as I say, but nothing at a school level. But the purpose of this assessment really is to make sure that children are on track in this fundamental part of learning to read. And so children who do not achieve the expected standard, the school is expected to go and put in interventions with that child to help them to develop in their phonic decoding and therefore support them in reading, which obviously is essential for the wider curriculum as well. Those children who don't achieve the standard in year 1 are required to retake the assessment in year 2, just to make sure that they have caught up as they need to. But it's very much, as I say, an assessment focused on the child and what the child does. That's why we call it a check rather than a test. But it is something that obviously is important to look nationally at whether children are on track to read throughout their schooling. We then get to the end of Key Stage 1, and here we have assessments currently These assessments have been, we have announced that they will become non-statutory, so they'll still be available to schools, but schools won't be required to use them. That's because these were the assessments, as I say, that were used to measure the starting point for progress. That's now moving to the reception baseline assessment, so not as to have too many statutory assessments. This one is being made non-statutory. But the way it's worked for the last few years is that what actually gets reported is a teacher assessment. So teachers are making the judgment of what children have achieved by the end of Key Stage 1. But in order to do that, there are nationally set frameworks of the sorts of things we expect children to be able to do. And there are also nationally set tests in English reading and mathematics, which teachers have to administer and use that to support their teacher judgments. So it isn't that they have to give the exact same outcome, because obviously teacher judgments can take a wider range of evidence as well, but the tests in reading and mathematics are required to support those teacher judgments. It is, as I say, administered at the end of year 2 and again reported to parents with national and regional performance published, but no school level data published. Because this is a teacher assessment, there is also moderation of this assessment. And so local authorities, we assess moderators, we train people and then give them a test to make sure that they are applying standards correctly. And then 25% of schools are moderated each year. So they submit their results. Somebody will come out and look at the evidence that supported those judgments. And obviously, if they find that there are things not being applied correctly, they will ask them to change those judgments. But hopefully they then will be submitted as an accurate reflection against those nationally set frameworks. We then have another very new assessment. It's the first it's again an assessment that has been introduced this academic year. It's another check, so it is very much focused on whether the children have acquired a specific skill to help them with their later work, and this time it's the multiplication tables. So it's a nationally set assessment of multiplication tables up to 12 by 12. Children are given 25 of those questions delivered digitally, and they are given 6 seconds to respond. This is our first national digital assessment, and we hope to be moving some of our other assessments from paper-based to digital over the coming years. But the nature of this assessment, the ministers wanted this to be about fluent recall. So we needed to use a digital platform in order to make sure that we weren't giving children lots of time to work out the answers, that it was recall that we were assessing here. It's administered over a 3-week window, so schools can choose when to do this assessment. And again, individual results are reported to parents. National and regional performance will be published, but no school level performance, again, trying to lower the stakes of the assessment at a school level while still giving us an understanding of whether children have learnt their multiplication tables by the end of year 4. I should have said up until this point, in fact, all of these assessments that I'm talking about are cohort census assessments. No sampling in any of these. It's about 600,000 pupils in England in each year group, and so yes, they're census assessments that we do. The final set of assessments that I'm going to talk about today are the end of Key Stage 2 assessments. These are assessments that are done at the end of primary school. And again, their purpose is to determine whether the attainment at the end of that second key stage. It's an assessment in mathematics, in English reading. There's also a test in English grammar, punctuation, and spelling. These are set nationally. They are externally marked, so all of the assessments up until this point have been the teachers who've been involved in them. The multiplication tables check is automated scoring through the digital platform, but the earlier assessments have been done by the teacher. The teacher has done the scoring of those. By the time of Key Stage 2, these are our most high stakes assessment, and therefore they are externally marked. Alongside those tests, there are teacher assessments recorded in English writing and science. No tests to support those judgments, but again, moderation of English writing, not of science, but of English writing, because that is used in our headline accountability measure. And so again, 25% of schools are moderated each year to check that their judgments for English writing are consistent with the national standards. All administered at the end of year 6, so the final year of our primary school. And as I say here, this is where we do get results reported to parents, but at school, national and regional level as well. So performance tables, the headline measure is whether a child has achieved the expected standard in mathematics and English reading and English writing. That's the main measure that is used to hold schools to account for their attainment. But as I said earlier, we also publish how schools have done and the progress that they have made between that starting point and the end point, to show where schools may have had cohorts that came to them with a lower level of knowledge and understanding, the work that they have done to improve them, even if not as many of them have achieved those expected standards. These are relatively controversial assessments because of the high stakes nature of them. We have in the past had attempted boycotts of these assessments, though the last one of those was 12 years ago. We didn't have any national assessments in England for the last 2 years because of COVID, but all of the assessments have come back again this academic year and have been delivered there. So that's a sort of quick run through the different assessments that we have in England. As I say, there's more information on the website, and you can always contact me, as I say, until the 8th of July, at which point I will be leaving the Department for Education and moving to ICAL UK to work with them on some really interesting projects that I'm obviously looking forward to. But that I think is probably enough information about the assessments in England.
Thank you very much, Dr. Colin, for sharing your perspective and also the best practice on assessment in England. As presented by the previous presenters, I also see that there are teacher assessment and national assessment. Interestingly, the teacher assessment was supposed to use the national framework in the assessment. That's very interesting, and it seems that all of us are also trying somehow to lower the stake of the assessment, but still get the right pictures of the results, mostly for policies and also for interventions. Thank you, Dr. Collins, again.